thank you so much, Ben, for inviting me to be part of the global Creative Morning conversation around time this month, ending like the last month of the year. So it's really like we're all thinking about time going into a new year. And thank you all for coming out on a Friday at 8 a.m. Lots of us aren't morning people, so I genuinely appreciate it. I'm a communication scholar. So that means that I take my background in anthropology, sociology, and psychology and use that to look at how the symbols and the messages that we use and create around, around lots of things. In my case, work. I study work, in particular organizational communication, how the symbols and the messages that we use in our work, about our work, shape lots of important quality of life outcomes. And my expertise is in what Ben mentioned. It's chronemics, actually, and it's the study of time as it's bound to human communication. And it's this idea that it's the ways we communicate, the things that we do on a daily basis. In the 21st century, lots of tweeting, commenting, discussing, downloading, connecting, how that shapes and is shaped by our experience of time. And St. Augustine has a great quote that I think sums up what most of us might experience around time. And it's, what then is time? If no one asks me, I know what it is. If I wish to explain it to him who asks, or her, I do not know. And the thing about time and the problem with that is it's so central to our very quality of life and our very existence and sort of being, that it's problematic that we don't talk about time. We don't know a lot about how to reckon with our experience of time. And this is because time is this part of culture that we call the hidden level. It's in fact called the silent language. It's this thing that is below the surface and completely unexamined. And that's really unacceptable for something that's so central to who we are and to our experience of being. And the thing about it is that, so each culture decides all of this stuff below the surface, and we take that as a truth. And so in Western culture, really common approach is this idea that time is a disciplining force. Like, we actually have this notion of time discipline. This is what time is. And so we get very minimal guidance other than the fact that in school and various religious organizations from the time we're born, we're taught two things about time. And we think it's truth because it's completely unexamined. We don't say that it's culture. We just think this is true. One, that time is a disciplining force. And two, that your time discipline is a measure of your virtue as a person. Okay? And so that, anyone heard that? Yeah. Okay? And so since the Industrial Revolution, and clearly only since the Industrial Revolution, we have used the schools and religious organizations as a means of readying the workforce around one thing, primarily, and that's punctuality. So did anyone ever get a certificate of punctuality in school? Did anyone? No one here? Did anyone ever get punished for not being punctual? Okay, yeah, okay. And no one ever told you that, hey, we need you to all be punctual because we need to coordinate. Like, we need to have everyone at school at the same time just so we can work together. And that there's no inherent virtue. And that this literally, clearly, this was not possible until the last few hundred years. The mechanized clock is only a few hundred years old, and it wasn't perfected right away, and it didn't proliferate. Like, we didn't have them. So the idea of what we think of as punctuality is an invention. And so the thing is, I want you just to recognize that it's useful. It got us all here. It's awesome. It does great things. But I want to separate out all of that unspoken, unexamined. I'm like, just talk about time as time. That's why when we travel, we start to get a sense that this might be cultural. It's like, oh, everyone doesn't have the same sense of punctuality that we do. Interesting. The idea, though, of punctuality does predate the clocks in this one sense, and it's the sense of kairos. There was this notion of the proper timing of things, and it didn't have anything to do with the clock. It was something like you might experience standing in line for Franklin's barbecue and hoping that you get there before the last man standing sign has come out, that you're ahead of this man or woman who gets Franklin's barbecue. But it's this idea that you're in time, right? That you showed up at the right time. Some people use what's called chronos to do that, and they get there now. It's around 6 a.m. I mean, it's really early these days. But others, it's like, well, I know I have some sense of how long, of when to get there. And as long as I'm there, then I'm punctual. That's all it was. And so today we're going to talk about all of these unexamined things and clarify them. And my goal is that your, what I call chronemic literacy, because it's a silent language, I think we should be literate at this, is that it sort of emancipates you from some things that just aren't true, but that might be valuable things that we want to do, but that we might decide we want to do differently. And so as creative professionals, one thing I thought, like the one thing that I could share with you, one takeaway is this. Through our communication, through the messages that we send, the symbols that we use, the ways we interact, we create time. We don't create sequence or duration, like aging, like that's not what I mean. But we create, not only did we literally create the clock, like that's creation, it's not even tied anymore to the earth. Like there's whole disciplines of people who seek to study it, like who use atomic clocks to measure it. It's not related to the Earth's rotation at all anymore, because the Earth is actually, it's natural and a little irregular, like most of us. Like we're not quite so precise. And so we literally, the beautiful thing is when we recognize that we are the ones that create time, and that our experience of time then cycles back to shape our communication with others. And so it's really weighty. Did anyone rush out of the house and was curt with someone this morning, or kind of grumpy, or flipped someone the bird on the freeway because they were a bad driver and you had to get here on time, and oh my goodness. Well, here's the thing. Time, the way that we've created it, it is this disciplining force, and it's this adversary. And when we went to the factories in the Industrial Revolution, it literally just replaced the wild animals that we were fighting before, like this fight or flight response that we've evolved to have to survive, right? To feed our families, to be alive. It just got replaced with time, because we didn't really need it anymore to fight the wild animals. We needed to get to work on time and to speed up. Like we needed it all for that. And the problem is we haven't evolved for things like something like traffic, where you're sitting in a car, there's nothing you can do. You can't kill. You can say you kill time. You can't kill time. Like there's no way you're ever gonna like be out of that misery. And so I like us to just think about this sometimes. And we all forget, because this hidden level of culture isn't something you don't translate on a daily basis, but every so often. And I want this morning to be one of those moments where you just sit back and realize, okay, this isn't like a thing that the heavens sent down. This is something that we're creating, and this clock is really useful for lots of things, but there's no truth to that. One little tidbit that, do you know one of the biggest predictors of happiness, like if you take a happiness scale, one of the biggest predictors of happiness is your morning commute. The worse your commute is, it's that important. Stuff like this and our experience of time is that important to our happiness. And so as creative professionals, something to think about. We all kind of work in this world of deadlines, and I can talk to you about how to make deadlines, and there's all sorts of research, and we could do that. But I want you first just to recognize that this is a coordinative tool, and there's not a truth to it. So speaking of symbols, the one that I chose to talk about today is a really common symbol, and it's balance. Who's here is working toward work-life balance? You've been sold a bill of goods. You notice balance, and we don't think about this, but if you think about the symbolically, what we're talking about when we say balance, we're talking about something that machines do, right? And so in order to balance something, you have to do two things. One, you have to be able to quantify two things, and they have to be only two. They have to have like some weight, some quantity, and you have to be able to separate these two things. How many of you find it really easy to separate work and life as a creative professional, as anyone? Yeah, in fact, again, work and life had never been talked about as separate until after the Industrial Revolution. There was no sense, there's researchers that this is what it created for us, was this idea that when we were in factories, there was work and there was life, and management wanted those things to be separate. But we're in the post-industrial era, and we work 24/7 from anywhere at any time. And so this idea that we can separate these, you're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure this out. So I recommend that we kind of rethink this, because it's become what it is. It's the 21st century means of time discipline. So the way that we were taught as kids at the early part of the Industrial Revolution, punctuality, and now we all take it as true and we don't question it. It's like, oh, that's good. Now it's like balance. Figure that out. Key to this, there's a lot of well-meaning behind it, but a lot of it is about this idea that you sure shouldn't drop work. Like now that there is this, like you can work from anywhere. Let's make sure that work is always important, and the concierge service and all of that. This is about getting your work done, like, right? And the on-site gyms, this is just about like sort of outsourcing the life part so you can do the work. So let's just be really clear that it's just another form of time discipline that we should rethink about. We should rethink. But here's why we persist. There's this woman on the beach in this beautiful, like peaceful, serene state. And so who wouldn't want this? Because what we hear, we don't see the scale. We have this symbol, I think, in our minds. Like, yeah, if I could balance, my life would feel like that. It would be easy. Well, let me tell you, work has never felt like that. It's never. We romanticize agrarian work. That shit was hard. Like, that is grueling. You think there has not been a point in time, and there won't be, that work isn't, and frankly that life isn't, right? So let's think about and I know I'm a scholar, and you might be weary of, well, this is words, is this semantics? No, it's not, because it's the symbol that shapes the way we interact with each other. It's a symbol that shapes how we feel. And how do I know this? So in a study that I collaborated with one of my former students on, when we did this with wage earners across the spectrum, from low wage earners to high wage earners, across age groups, across genders. When we asked low wage earners, so tell me about your work-life balance, they didn't even know what we meant for the most part. Like, they had never heard it. And the ones that did said, oh yeah, that's for managers. Like, that's not for us. That's not. So why do we want to be part of something that only is a message to certain socioeconomic groups? Like, that's first of all. But second of all, so the high wage earners who knew all about it and had worked really hard at it, they were literally in tears. They were pounding on the desk. They felt betrayed because they thought that if they did it right, that it was going to feel like this, and that their organizations were saying, hey, here's all of our policies. Can you, we have vacation time, we have flexible, we have all these things. You should work it out and make sure that work never suffers, but you figure it out. They felt betrayed by this notion that they could ever achieve that. And notably, because we're going to talk about that in a second, but notably most people don't take vacation time, or they don't use the flexible work policies, they don't use the leave because of all that unexamined stuff, right? Because of our culture around time. So policies, it's a means of disciplining us. So let's talk about what we won't say, or what we might say if we were to talk about balance. It would feel something much more like this, right? Where you're moving, and it's a pretty difficult thing to do, right? So here's a guy on the tightrope. This gets us closer to this idea of balance, and I think it feels closer to that because we're moving. We're not static like this beautiful, serene picture. But for most of us, it's much more like this. Like, okay, first of all, there's not two things, there's many things, and I feel like I'm going to fall to my death if I don't keep them all. So what do I do, right? So if I keep them all, that is when I fall to my death. So what do? She had 6 balls here. We throw 5 of them to the side. And we say, okay, I could probably manage it if I just do work. And I just keep the other stuff. I could probably walk this tightrope if I just do one thing. Or you throw everything except for non-work, right? And you decide, I just can't be part of this. So this is the problem. This is how we feel. But note that both in the previous examples, the thing that actually allows them to manage at any level is a notion of alignment, something that bodies are actually meant to do, and something that would help her if she wanted to do this crazy acrobatic attempt. Alignment would actually help a lot. So let's just stay flat on our feet, moving forward, and talk about alignment instead. The thing I like about this, it's something bodies are meant to do, and it's about multiple, almost innumerable, interrelated parts of ourselves that we can't measure, but we don't have to measure. We just have to feel qualitatively. When you're out of alignment, you may not know what that muscle is called, but you know something doesn't feel right. You know that things are harder to do, that you're not able to move in the ways you'd like to move. And so it's about positioning of those parts, right, in relationship to each other. And this is like career and social and physical and spiritual and communal. It's like all of that stuff. And here's the other beautiful thing. We're all made different. We all have a different center of gravity. It's going to look different for everyone, and it's going to look different at different times of our lives. If you have different goals, your alignment's you're going to be training to do different things, and not running, just walking, but moving forward, because life is always in motion. And here's the other thing I love about it. It doesn't let us off the hook with this idea that, well, I can't do all of it, so I'm just going to throw everything over here and just hold work, and that'll work. Because with alignment, what happens if you stay out of alignment for too long? You're injured, right? So we don't get to say, well, I'm just going to throw everything, all my health and wellness and all of that, family, and I'm just going to handle work, because we know that if we need alignment, we have to actually keep all of that together. And the other beautiful thing is we're not falling to our death. We're flat on our feet, and we are going to get out of alignment. Every person gets out of alignment. And when you get out of alignment, what do? You stop and regroup. You get a coach to help you. You get a therapist. Like, you get someone to say, oh, okay, here's how to get back. And here's a way to help you get back in alignment. And it's number one, it's about longevity. And so in the short term, we will overreach, we will go too fast, we will do things, we can get back to a place that is actually sustainable in the long term, right? And so that's standard. So let us, as people, talk about our alignment, not about our balance. And let's let organizations, and let's ask organizations to actually talk plainly about time. No more work-life balance policies. Talk plainly about time. For example, time off. A very simple thing. Boston Consulting Group did a study. They did an experiment, actually, where they found that if they gave their consultants just one night off a week, or even one day off, but predictable time off, what happened? Customer satisfaction went up. Openness among teams, quality of work goes up. Satisfaction, commitment to the organization goes up. Like, it actually works, because we do need some time to regroup. Okay, let's have them talk about family leave and the fact that no one takes it and why no one takes it. Don't have something, talk about the culture. Talk about what's under there and why no one actually uses the policies. Don't just list the policies to me anymore. I want to know data on who uses it. And I want to know data on what their promotion possibilities look like after they use it. That's what I want to know. There's also over here living wages. If time is money and we care so much about work-life balance, then why wouldn't we have a living wage so that people, because people at the low wage earners work a lot of hours to try to make ends meet. And so if you care about work-life balance in general because of wellness, then let's talk about that. Let's talk about working hours. Industrial accidents like the BP oil spill and all of these like major, if you look it up, some of the most, like the biggest industrial accidents has been night shift, people who have been working back-to-back shifts and are just chronically sleep deprived. Let's talk about that, okay? So I teach a class, a large lecture class actually at UT called Time Matters. And so I give them assignments, lots of assignments. And so I thought there's 4 that you might find really valuable in this process of finding and achieving alignment and working toward alignment. There's one called scheduled, where you take some appointment, something you have scheduled, and you reschedule it or you even cancel it. Something that people will want to have, something that people will be grateful that you reschedule, or you just avoid scheduling something, right? Because, and I did this yesterday with a friend because I was meeting Ben here, and we had something and it just wasn't going to work. And I said, hey, would tomorrow work? And she said, thank God, because I was actually running late as well. You'd be surprised how grateful people are to have something, not something big, not some major, not rescheduling Creative Mornings, not that, but something, right? So take that into account because it allows you a moment with your inner self. Like, and one thing that I even recommend is that if you do it, it's not to get something else done, that you just do it so that you can just exhale. We have busy schedules, and so you just have a moment where you just take a deep breath and you get some alignment with what is the inner self, because you may not even remember what that was, and use that maybe to go meditate or go do yoga. There's another one called Snail Mail, which is where you handwrite and mail 2 letters to 2 different people, one to someone you see all the time, and the other to someone you haven't spoken with in a long time, and see what happens. See how that helps with your relational, like that part of your relational values, and the surprise and the shock that people will have that you actually wrote to them, and actually the way that they'll probably cherish it, but they probably will be suspicious at first, like something's wrong. Because when my students do this, and most people are like, oh my God, what happened? Why am I getting a letter in the mail? So, but the time and the slow time that it takes, the conversations we have by letter are totally different than the conversations we tweet. It's totally different. And so that's another way to kind of say, oh, who are those people? Just that question helps us with that realignment. Another called sleepless. Take 7 days to commit to getting a full night's sleep. A full night's sleep. And if you don't, then deal with yourself. Talk to yourself about why, like what did you say, like what was the reason? Like, what were you doing so that you didn't get, because you would be surprised how chronically sleep deprived Americans are, and how it's the simplest thing you can do for your physical health is actually just to be rested. Like you would, I mean, literally, I have a whole semester. I don't have time to tell you everything, but trust me, it is like a huge, huge health thing. And the last one is probably the hardest for everyone. Take a day to not multitask. Take a day and see. And this, I think, helps realign with the creative muse. Like you would be surprised with just doing one thing, how engaged people can get. And again, my students I've taught this class for about a decade, have done this. And this is what I hear. It's that then I get to actually really get into one thing because I'm not multitasking, and the focus can be amazing. So not all the time. Multitasking has its place. All of these things have their place for sure. I'm not suggesting that we only write letters or that we only do one thing at a time, but that we think, that we just stop every so often and think about, let's have some variety in our culture. And so the way that I found alignment was when I was an assistant professor, I wanted so badly to get a dog. But we have this thing called tenure, and it's called publish or perish, and you work like ridiculous numbers of hours, and most people are burned out by the time it's over, but you work ridiculous number of hours to get tenure, and you put everything else on hold. And at some point I just said, and it was years into it, and I was having dinner with my husband, I said, I'm done. I really want a dog, and I'm not going to wait anymore. I just am going to get a dog, and just whatever has to happen is going to happen, because I'm a dog person, and I missed having a dog. I didn't have one in grad school. And so that was my way of finding some kind of alignment, and I named him Kairos, and I just laughed. Yeah, he was every bit of Kairotic. And so at any rate, the quote I want to leave you with is this, it's final. But in the form of time is the form of living. And so I want us to think about time and talk about some of this unexamined stuff and how it works for us and find ways that we can make it work better. Thank you.